again.
Hello.
I am so proud to be here. I'm so proud to be here at Hampton. This is just an amazing moment. If I might just tell you, this committee worked so hard to do this. And thank you, Susan. Thank you, Cassandra, Kalita. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Vincent, and all the other members of the committee, Sheila, who worked very hard to do this. Like so many other things we do, it started off with an idea. It started off with a spirit. And so I'm going to talk about criminal justice, but I'm going to have with this talk a talk about spirit. Because criminal justice, or I should say criminal injustice, has been something we've lived with since we arrived. Because in 1619, a month before our arrival, this colony had decided to create a government with the permission of England. Now first, let us just take a step back. Before there were any Africans in this colony, it was founded in 1607, Jamestown Colony. If you think about the King James Version of the Bible, that King James is the one that gave the contract to allow the founding of this colony, the expansion of the English Empire into the New World. So the other entities, Portuguese, the French, the Spanish had already expanded into the New World. The English were a little late to the game. So it was Portuguese attacking what is now Angola, taking those Africans, placing them on that ship. So these world powers were in battle even back then. As was pointed out, wars had been going on for such a long time. And so you had people who had issues with their religion. They had issues with their ethnicity. There were many different issues that would give rise to people taking a chance to cross the Atlantic Ocean in order to come to this colony in the middle of nowhere. But they did it. What kind of people were they? Well, let's put it this way. They weren't the highest level all the time. As a matter of fact, John Rolfe, the one who wrote in his journal about these 20 and odd Negroes who arrived in 1619, wrote also that he was concerned about the quality of people coming into the colony. There were questions even then. And then we have the starving time. Because 1607 was the founding. In the next 2 to 3 years, they had the worst drought in Virginia's history up to that time. And they had the Native Americans, as was pointed out, who did not want them there. They said, if you want to stop in, get some water, some provisions, and keep going. But then they stayed and overstayed their welcome. The Native Americans began attacking the fort. For those of you, of course, many of you have traveled down to that fort, you've seen the body or the remains of Jane. Jane is a victim of cannibalism. Yes, they were practicing cannibalism. And since Jane's remains show the scrapings in the book, Jane, written by Dr. Jim Horn, the Dr. Jim Horn of the Jamestown site, wrote about the cannibalism experienced in that colony between 1608 and 1609. So before we arrived, there were problems. And this is what we entered into. And as my mentor, my late mentor, Jocelyn Topham Cooper used to say, if you watch the way they treat each other, don't wonder why they treat you this way. So we began to see the criminal inequities in our justice system that they had in play with the case of Punch. Well, you have a black man named Punch who runs away as indentured servants with 2 white men, Europeans, we'll say. Europeans. They're captured back. Punch is given a lifetime of servitude as a punishment. But the white men, the Europeans, are not. They're given extra time in their servitude, but then they're allowed to go free. We see the difference in the early 1600s in this criminal injustice system. And then it continues along that line. There were some love relationships between the races. I always like to say, if you put 2 different groups together and you let the sun don't go down, 9 months later when the sun comes up, you have some mixed race babies. There were many love relationships with these mixed race babies, but there were also relationships that were assaults. So now what is the status of this baby? English father, African mother. Well, we had the case 1654 of Elizabeth Key. Yes, we were suing in the 1600s. Suing for freedom cases in the 1600s, because we knew our power, our spirit knew it was wrong. And we tried to use the systems they put in place that said, use these systems for justice. How long have we been doing that? 400 years. So we used the system Elizabeth Key did to save my father, who claims me, my mother, Black Bess. Here we are. What is my status? They wanted to use her labor for free because, and I've said this to many groups, I've been the only black person in a group of whites, and I've said this: greed is the core of enslavement. Greed. And racism was created to alleviate that guilt over the greed. Why? You don't deserve to be in the embrace of law. God said, whispered to me in my back room, that Ham is, your foreparent, therefore you must serve out the sentence that's greater than these other groups. You deserve labor without pay because God said, the Bible said. Some of you might have heard about, the Museum of the Bible that actually has a slaveholder's Bible where they excise the different pieces out that were then taught to the enslaved people that say the Bible, God said you are supposed to be an enslaved person and be a good servant and work for me for life, for free. But what about those who would rise up? Well, Elizabeth Key said, no, I'm not your servant. I was born half free because of my father. Through litigation and legislation, she was finally allowed her freedom. She married her attorney, did very well. Then they changed the law. And they created a line of lineage that said that any baby born of an enslaved woman is enslaved at birth. At birth. And that there's no line of inheritance of that child to the English father. So we're now in the 1600s. By 1680, Virginia passes a law taking away the right of self-defense. No mother can protect her child. No husband can protect his wife. No children can protect their parents. The punishment, 30 lashes on the bare back, well laid on. And if they resist service, death. Murder. Murder is at the core of how this country has maintained taking the Native Americans' land, taking human beings from another part of the world, forcing that human being to work for free, for life. Freedom becomes a crime. Slavery is now the law. Freedom is a crime. Escape is a crime. This is our criminal injustice system at work, the core, the root. So by the time we get to 1705, we have chattel slavery. Chattel means movable property. Chattel slavery is the law. Escape. And you'll see within law that the punishments become more and more brutal, but they don't want to kill the property because that property is valuable as a workhorse. So they began to cut pieces off of the property as punishment. An ear, branding, or for runaway on the face with an iron brand. Maybe they hold them by the feet above on the tree limb, their head a foot from the ground for a day, maybe 2 days. This is the punishment for our freedom, but that spirit made us run away anyway.
Amen.
Then they stopped having Africans gather. It's like, okay, initially, if one was baptized as a Christian, they would not allow this English to hold enslaved Christians. So when we became baptized as Christians, they said, but you can't be a real Christian because you have no soul. So you can practice Christianity. Here, we'll tell you the words to say, be a good servant. Because God said you are to work off your sin. So when we get to the 1700s, New York City, 1741, there's an uprising. The Africans and the poor whites have come together in an uprising in New York. At least it's assumed there's an uprising because there's been this fire. And then the fire spread. Remember, everything was made of wood back then for the most part, and fire spread easily. So what was the punishment? When they decided the punishment would be, they would be burned alive. But people rose up anyway. People mentioned Mom Bet. Mom Bet in 1780 heard the people yelling out the Massachusetts Constitution, the freedoms that we must have. She went to a lawyer because her slave mistress was beating her and her sister, and she said enough. She decided to sue. She found a lawyer. They went to court. She gained her freedom. Mom Bet changed her name to Elizabeth Freeman. When we go forward to 1880 in the U.S. Constitution, the international slave trade ends as far as the United States is concerned, but now we have to make our own product. Now you see cases like Celia. Celia in 1855. Celia, who was in a love relationship with another enslaved man on the plantation, but Robert Newsom, who had purchased her to be a concubine for him, decided this love relationship could not go on. She had already born 2 of his children. She had been purchased at age 14. She was only 19 now. She wanted a new life. She was in love. But what happened? Robert Newsom said, I'm coming for you. Celia said, what is that one word the African woman is not supposed to say to a European man? No. He came to her room, the one he had out in the back of the field, where he could sneak off and nobody knew. Oh, Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, you've gone over to Monticello, you've seen that little room he kept her in above his bed? Check it out, the concubine. Well, this concubine, Celia, picked up a log and beat Robert Newsom to death. Chopped up his body and burned it to pieces and buried him. However, when this gentleman, young man, enslaved person, was asked, do you know anything about the missing Robert Newsom? He said, go ask Celia, she may know. When she knew she had been betrayed by her love, she confessed. But here's the criminal justice or injustice system at that time. What is that? It should have been self-defense. She was a woman protecting her virtue. African women had no virtue to protect. But could she tell her side of the story? No. No person of color was allowed to testify in a court of law. No person of color was allowed to decide the fate of a white person. I give you these cases, and I'll give you one more, and that is Shipp versus United States. And in Shipp versus United States, we have a black man in Chattanooga, Tennessee, who was accused of trying to rape a white woman. He was not anywhere near the scene. He had all these witnesses, but they had already decided some black man was going to die for this. So they dragged him and put him in jail, and they say, you can die one of 2 ways. You can confess and be executed, or you can be lynched. He said, I didn't do anything. A black attorney went to the U.S. Supreme Court and said, you must stop what is happening in Tennessee. The U.S. Supreme Court justice said, send this letter, stop this right now. When the sheriff Shipp found out that the U.S. Supreme Court had intervened in what their planned execution and or lynching would have been, they left the keys over on the table and left an old 80-year-old man to watch the unlocked jail cell. And in the middle of the night, the crowd came, dragged him away, hung him above the bridge, shot him, and then hung him and shot the dead body. And pinned something to him that said, U.S. Supreme Court, come and get your N-word now. What we need to understand and what we need to know is that everything I've said up to that point, into the 1900s, we're living with the vestiges, the remnants now in our criminal injustice system. We have the injustice of having blacks struck from juries based on race so that they were not able to deliberate the outcome of these decisions involving black defendants. We have black victims of crimes who are not having their cases taken seriously. We have black police officers, yet we don't have the kind of fairness within the policing that we need, because too often the video is our running and being shot in the back without justice. Eric Garner said, I can't breathe. Under the criminal injustice system that we have, this prison industrial complex, our spirit that gave rise to our being here today, that saw these things happen, the lynchings of people like Mary Turner, whose baby, unborn child was cut from her body when she opposed the lynching of her husband. We have had the spirit to rise up and say, we are going to make this country work for us. Our Constitution is going to work for us. We are going to have the freedom of full citizenship. And now within our sights, in this 400-year period, we need to put our eyes, our visions, our heart, and our spirit into changing the criminal and justice system and the prison industrial complex. It is our next step in our full development of this journey of 400 years. And may the ancestors say, Ashe.